Breathing in, there is no one sitting. Breathing out, there is only sitting. No one sitting, only sitting. Breathing in, there is peace while breathing. Breathing out, there is joy while sitting. Peace while breathing. Joy while sitting. Breathing in, peace is the breathing. Breathing out, joy is the sitting. Most respected Thai, dear Sangha, today is the 21st of June in the year 2018. We are in the upper hamlet in the Dharma Cloud temple, the still water meditation hall, on the last day before the departure day of our 21-day retreat. And yesterday we had a question and answer session, and some of the questions were not answered, but we don't have so much time. How can we recognize right effort? How can we recognize when the difficulties and the pain is an opportunity for the practice, and when they are a sign that we are going in the wrong direction? I think the practice of the four right efforts has been made very clear. That is, that when something unwholesome is arising in us, we take care of it so that it doesn't have to stay uncared for in our mind. And when something unwholesome is not arising, we should not put ourselves in a place which will help the unwholesome or support the unwholesome to arise. And then when something wholesome is arising, we have to practice in order to maintain as long as we can. And when something wholesome has not arisen, we need to practice to help it arise. So when difficulties are there, it means that the wholesome cannot be there, because we will treat the difficulties as something unwholesome. And it's always an opportunity for us to practice. Whatever difficulty or pain comes up in us, it's always an opportunity to practice. And once we have been able to embrace and calm down the unwholesome thing that is arising, the next step is to try and help something wholesome to arise. And generally we would think of wholesome as joy, happiness, or peace. So we need to walk in such a way, breathe in such a way that we can feel the happiness, we can feel the peace. Just to be able to walk is something that can make us happy. We think of, very close to us is Thai, who cannot walk now. And so whenever we can walk for Thai. And we know that to be able to walk is a great happiness. So we have to remind ourselves of those things. Now that the unwholesome has quietened down, calmed down, I need to walk and tell myself walking is happy. How happy to be able to walk. How happy to be able to breathe. How happy to be able to see the blue sky. So that is practicing right effort. And right effort means that we don't need to push ourselves. We should not make a huge effort. And the German is anstrengen. Anstrengung. We should not do that. I don't know what is in English. And you get the idea that you make an effort. And that is not right practice. Right practice is always to enjoy the practice. So when we remind ourselves how happy to be able to walk, then we do it very lightly. We are not forcing ourselves. And it's a training. Because sometimes the seed of happiness, it has become buried very deep. And we have to train in order for it to be not so deep down buried, more available to us when we need it. So in the beginning, maybe it takes a bit of time for you to walk and remind yourself happy before you have a real happy feeling. But when you've trained yourself for a while, then it will be quick. You just have to take one step. How happy I am to be able to walk. What a joy to be able to walk. Yeah. So if you're worried that you're doing the wrong kind of practice, you've been doing it for months and it hasn't made any change to you, then you should find the teacher in yourself, first of all, to tell you what you could be doing better. Or if you're really stuck, you have to go to your Sangha, your local Dharma teacher, your local IOI member, and share with them, I'm practicing like this. It doesn't work. Please can you give some suggestions? So if you have a very difficult relationship with somebody, the best thing to do is to have a consultation with Sister Cheng Kham, Sister True Emptiness. But sometimes her consultation line is very long, people waiting, like in the doctor's surgery when many people waiting for an appointment. So the next thing is to find another Dharma teacher to have a consultation with. Go to a retreat. Vipassana retreats are fine, but remember to practice the four right efforts in the Vipassana retreat. That is, keep alive the joy. And remember that concentration always has an object. So you have to have something to concentrate on when you're in a Vipassana retreat. And the three complexes of superiority, inferiority, and equality can only be resolved when we have realized no self. So the way to practice is like we've just been doing now. Every day we have to have an ability to look in to our no self nature. And during this retreat you have been offered many ways to do that. Any other questions I hope will be answered by today's Dharma talk. If not, there are plenty more retreats coming up. Both in your own country and in Plum Village. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no escape. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no escape. I am of the nature to die. There is no escape. All that I cherish, all that I love, are of the nature to change. There is no escape from separation. My actions of body, speech and mind are my possessions. I inherit my actions of body, speech and mind. Whatever I do, I say or I think, all these things I have to inherit. Okay, that's enough performance for today. So this practice, we call it sometimes the 5 themes and the 5 remembrances. I am of the nature to grow old, to have ill health, to die, to be separated from those I love, to all that I do, say or think, I shall inherit. So this teaching of the Buddha, we are recommended to contemplate daily, as long as our health allows it. And we could say that this is one of the teachings that is not a deep teaching. It is a teaching about the historical dimension. So we still have an I here, and growing old. So we will say, this is the historical dimension. And then we talk about a karma. We say, everything I do, I will inherit. And we have already heard that there's no I who does something and inherits something. That is what is meant by the unmade. The made is divided into 2. The doer and the receiver are the same person. The unmade is they're not the same person. So now, if you're ready, we shouldn't really do this, because when we go from the historical to the ultimate, we should go down the line of the Z with a practice of interbeing. But today we're now going to break the rule. I think we need to look at page 24. That is the trouble with the books. Sometimes they take you too quickly into the ultimate dimension, and you don't really understand. So if you look on page 24, at the 4th paragraph, you will see that it says, because there is the detail conditioned by birth, our old age and death, someone could ask, Who is the one who grows old and dies? To whom do old age and death belong? The person might reply, I am the one who grows old and dies, and the growing old and dying belongs to me. If the person, now we go to page 25, if that person continues to ask, who is the formations? And the formations here are the 5 skandhas, the body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations and consciousness. Who is them? To whom do the formations belong? That person may want to reply, I am the formations. The formations are mine. Bhikshus, this is page 26. Bhikshus, if you are able to abandon ignorance and gain understanding by leaving desire behind, then who is the one who grows old and dies? To whom do old age and death belong? Your understanding means that old age and death are ended. So, the Buddha says you have the tendency to say, I am the one who grows old and dies. But you have to ask the question, who is the one who grows old and dies? Where is that I who grows old and dies? Can you find it? And one time, we already heard that story. Yeah. I won't tell it again. But when Thai's teacher said to Thai, but who is the one who will not be tired after I die? It's the same kind of, who is the one who will not be tired? Soon I will die, so I will not be tired anymore. But who is the one who will not be tired? So it's a little bit like a koan for us. Who is the one who dies? Who is the one who grows old? Who is the formations? Who is the one inside or outside the formations? These are koans for us. And these questions are to take us into the nearer to the ultimate dimension. One time we were practicing, I was leading the meditation, I am of the nature to grow old. There is no escape from going old. And one old lady came up afterwards and said, oh, I don't need to do that meditation anymore because I am already old. But the thing is, whether you're young or old, every day you're becoming a little bit older. So please don't make the excuse you're already old that you don't need to do that meditation. You can always be older. It's my experience. Yeah. But talking like that, we are a little bit in the historical dimension. And we have to use that kind of language. We have to do this meditation in order to be able to touch the ultimate dimension, where we see that there isn't an I who grows old, there isn't an I who dies. And Thai has always said that if at the moment of our death, we can answer that question, who is it who is dying? It can be very beneficial. So if we are able to ask ourselves that question, or our Sangha who is helping us at that time can ask us that question, it will be very helpful. Who is it who is dying? And we also had a wonderful opportunity this afternoon, just about 10 minutes ago, to practice who is it who is sitting, who is it who is breathing, and to see that, in fact, there is only breathing, there is no one breathing. So we could say in the same way, there is only dying, there is no one dying. There is only growing old, there is no one growing old. That is a practice for us to do. And the reason why the Buddha taught, this is one of the advantages of the teaching, this is because that is that it helps us. We don't need an I. We don't need we don't need I feel pleasure, so I crave the object of my pleasure, and so I have all the suffering of craving and so on. There doesn't have to be an I. There can just be, there is a pleasant feeling, and the pleasant feeling leads to a desire for more of that pleasant feeling. And when I have the pleasant feeling, when there's the feeling that the pleasant feeling is there will be the grasping to that pleasant feeling, and so on. So the last time we said that the difficulty, the main difficulty of the Nidanas is the being birth. Because there is being, there is birth. Because normally what people will explain that is that if there was no existence, for instance, there was no life on earth, there could not be birth. So that is one way that you can practice and look at that. But according to many ways that Buddhists, so-called Buddhists, think, that birth means rebirth into samsara. Oh, we have to be born into all this again. So this one story you haven't heard in this retreat, you probably heard it in another one. It's about a dream that Thai had. And in that dream, Thai and Thai's brother, I didn't tell this story in this retreat, did I? Good. Thai and Thai's brother, they are in a market. And there is a market stall that looks a little bit like an apothecary with many drawers with maybe medicines in them. And Thai is holding the hand of his little brother, and they are looking at these drawers, wondering what is inside. And then the shopkeeper comes out from the back and points to them and these drawers and says, "That is all the suffering you've been through, and you're going to go through it again." So at that point, Thai told us in the dream, Thai felt, no, I can't go through that again. That was the first thought. It didn't last very long. Maybe half a second that thought lasted. But then Thai looked straight at the shopkeeper and said, that's okay, we can do it. With the Sangha, we can do it. We accept all that suffering. So, that is, many of us are like that. We think, oh, I have to go through all this again. It's too much. We don't want to be born. So somehow we want to, there is that tendency. We want to get rid of birth. And one day, when I was doing a question and answer session, we've been talking about the goodness of suffering, how without happiness, how without suffering you cannot have happiness. That suffering and happiness always go together. And so in the question and answer session, that person asked, what I think would be, say that we didn't have to have any happiness, and then we wouldn't have to have any suffering either. Wouldn't that be the solution? No more happiness, doesn't matter, as long as we don't have to have any more suffering. So that is the tendency of how people are. Suffering is something we really, really don't like. We really, really don't want. But without suffering, how can we learn? Without suffering, how can we have compassion? And compassion is one of the roots of happiness. So, this is the tendency of human beings. I don't want to be born. And so what is the way to get rid of birth is to get rid of being. And so being becomes the enemy. We want to get rid of being because that is the cause of birth. And so we think, when I die, just nothing would be wonderful. No happiness, no suffering, no being. And we come to, like Thai Pháp Ưng said, we come to have an idea there is something called eternal death. You've practiced all those years, you've become an arahat, you love life, and after you die, eternal death. It doesn't make sense. Materialists believe in eternal death, but someone who loves life, who's practiced, so the being has become a difficulty, and that is one of the reasons why Thai had to revise the Heart Sutra, because it didn't have the no being, no non-being. And it's so important that we can realize that nature of no being and no non-being. And so when we revise the nidanas, we have to look at this point especially. So that being is all there on its own, because there is grasping, there is being. It doesn't make much sense. How does grasping make being? Maybe being makes grasping. So we have to make being clear. And we put it like that, no being. Because it's like you may want to say that one of the nidanas is the left, and you want to get rid of it. You want to get rid of the left. But you can't. As long as you have the right, you have to have the left. So as long as you have being, you have to have non-being. And as long as you have birth, you have to have death. You only have to take a walk in nature, in the forest, to be able to see that birth would not be possible without death. You see the dead leaves, you see the new buds on the tree, you see the dead leaves from last year, and you know that the new leaves couldn't be born without the old leaves. So birth and death always have to go together, just as being and non-being do. And last time we also showed that our idea, what we are talking about is our idea. Our ideas of birth and death are based on our ideas of being and non-being. And our ideas of being and non-being are based on our ideas of birth and death. If you did not have an idea of being and non-being, you could not have an idea of birth and death. Because birth means that from non-being you come into being. And death means that from being you go into non-being. So these two things, it's true, they always go together. And if in your meditation you are able to see the no being, no non-being, you at the same time will see the no birth and the no death. So this is how we need to practice. And when somebody I love dies, what I recognize is that the first thing that comes into my mind when I hear that person has died is they don't exist anymore. That comes into my mind automatically when I hear the word death. The word non-being come into my head. And then I always have to ask myself, when they were alive, were they really being? Were they an absolute being when they were alive? And then when I look deeply into that person's life, I will see that their whole life they were changing from moment to moment. They were being born and dying in every moment. We get caught, we grasp to somebody as a solid entity. And when they die, we think we've lost that solid entity. But in fact, when they were alive, that solid entity was never there. It was just the perception we had about that person. Look at them as a child, as a teenager, middle age, old age. They were always changing, and always one thing in them was dying. The teenager had to die for the young adult to be born. They were being born and dying all their life. We never noticed it. We took them as one thing. So it's important to look into that, our idea of being. And if possible, we have to always, whenever we can, replace the word being with the word interbeing. So now if you like to look on page 12, at the sutra called the Emptiness of Formations. It is like when there is the clapping of two hands, there is a sound. Just so when eyes and form condition each other, there is the arising of eye consciousness. When these three elements come together, it gives rise to contact. Contact gives rise to feeling. Feeling gives rise to perception and volition. So this is a kind of conditioned arising, but not in terms of 12 nidanas, but 5 nidanas. All these things are not a self. They are not permanent. If they were a self, then that would be an impermanent self, not eternal, not secure, not unchanging. Why is that? These are things that arise and have to go through birth, decay, and death. All formations are a magic show, like flames. They only last for a bare instant, and then they are destroyed. They do not truly come and go. So a flame is made up of many, many flames. One flame destroyed, and another one, and another one. And that is the same of our mental formations, like contact, feeling, perception. They don't last for more than a moment. So we need for there to be a sound. We need for there to be the sound waves, the vibration. We need there to be the ear, the organ of the ears, the otic nerve. We need there to be the ear's consciousness, that which is conscious of a sound. And only then can we hear. And neuroscientists today, they say that if a tree fell down in the forest and there was no one there with ears and ear consciousness, the tree would make no sound. This makes sense? We always think that the sounds happening outside of our consciousness, but we need consciousness to make the sound. We need two hands to make the sound. One hand cannot. In the old time in China, they have a koan. What is the sound of one hand clapping? They probably got that from here. So now I like to come back to the idea of karma. We just said karma svakosmi, karma dayada, karma yoni, karma bandhu, karma satisharanam. Yeah. We said that karma, I am, it's very clear, the word I am, as me. I am the possessor of my karma, of karma. I shouldn't say my karma. I am the possessor of karma. Karma here means action. It means action of body, speech, and mind. And normally we think of karma as two, as divided in two. The karma, which is the cause, hetu, karma hetu, and the karma, which is the fruit, karma phala. So karma has two aspects: cause and fruit. So normally when we have a sentence like I'm the possessor of karma, we think in terms of the fruit. Okay? I'm getting the fruit that I sowed the seed, which was the cause, and now I'm getting the fruit. That is how we think. So I am the inheritor. of karma. Whatever I do, whatever I say, whatever I think, whether it is good or bad, I inherit that. I will inherit that. Now we need to look at page 32. Okay, the Buddha is talking to who? Janasoni? Brahman. If you say that the person who acts and the person who reaps the fruit, this is the second paragraph on page 32. If you say that the person who acts and the person who reaps the fruit of the action are the same person, you have fallen into the view of eternalism. If you say that they are two different people, you have fallen into the view of nihilism. When I give teachings about the meaning and principles of the Dharma, I keep away from these two extremes and follow the middle path. The middle path means this is because that is, this arises because that arises, and then the sutra should stop there. I always say, if you look at all the sutras in here, they all have these 12 nidanas. I always said the sutra should stop there. The 12 nidanas are a refrain that get added, and they don't really belong in this sutra. So, here we say, I am the possessor of karma, I am the inheritor of karma. And it makes it sound as if the I who possesses is the one who caused the karma and now is getting the fruit of karma. The one who inherits means that either in the past life or in this life, I did something and now I'm getting the fruit. So this teaching of thinking that I am inheriting what I have done in the past has been very helpful to me. Often. When I suffer, I don't get upset with God. But I recognize that that something has been done. And this is the result. The other day when we were doing the lamps transmission, I won't try and sing anymore because I don't think I chanted the verse from Shantideva from the 5th century CE, and that verse is Yat Kimchit Jagato Dukham Tat Sahvam Mahi Pachyatam Bodhisattva Shubhai Sawai Jagat Sukhitam Astuja. And it means whatever suffering there is in the world, may that ripen in me. By all the Shubhai means beautiful. By all the beautiful actions of Bodhisattva, it really said Bodhisattva Shubai, by all those beautiful Bodhisattva things, may the world be happy. So sometimes in Christian church, in the Mass we used to say, mea culpa, maxima culpa. And I never liked that very much. I mean, my culpa, my blame, what I'm to blame for, not a blame, my mistake, my very big mistake. And I said one time to the priest, I didn't make any mistake this week. I haven't done anything very bad this week. Why do I have to say mea culpa, mea culpa? And the priest said, he said, don't think about your mistake. He said that, think about maybe your ancestor mistake. Think about all the mistake that is happening in the world. So later on, when I read this thing, may all the suffering ripen in me, I thought a little bit like that. But we do have the collective consciousness. And we also heard about the 3 touchings of the earth, and the second touching where we see that we are. It's not that we visualize somebody who's at the point of death and very afraid, but we say, I am someone who is at the point of death and very afraid. I am someone who finds no happiness in family life. So it's not seeing that as outside of ourselves. And then in the next part we say, I am someone who has the arms of caring action, who has gone beyond the fear of birth and death. So we also see that in us, those things are in us, they're not outside of us. That's a little bit like the verse of Shantideva. But I want to learn. I want to learn from my mistakes. And sometimes, if I don't suffer, I don't learn the lesson so deeply. If I've done something that has hurt somebody, and then somebody else hurts me in the same way, it helps me because I can forgive the person who's hurt me, because I know I did the same thing. And also I can understand that the person who hurt me didn't really mean to hurt me, just as I didn't really mean to hurt the person I hurt. So from that point of view, what I learn from this teaching on I am the inheritor of my actions has been extremely helpful in my practice. And I can fully understand why the Buddha so often taught us to see how actions have their result. But we also have to understand that the Buddha's teachings go deeper than that. And if we become caught in the idea that the I who did the action are the same as the I who received the fruit, then we fall into what is called the view of eternalism. That is a kind of view of permanence. There is a permanent I there that never changes, that does things and receives the effect, but is like a soul, an eternal soul, and that is wrong. But if we go in the other direction and we say, oh, I never did that. I never did that. It happened 3 days ago and I was completely different from what I am today. That also, it won't work in the court of law with the police, but it also doesn't work in our own practice. So we have to recognize that action continues. And even though I am different now, and I see that doing that hurts somebody, all the same, the fruit of the action is still there and has to ripen. So it's a very deep and difficult teaching. And many people in the time of the Buddha who heard it directly from the Buddha, Oh, good. Okay, page 14. Page 15. You itinerant monks coming from another country, still doubt and have hesitation. Why is this, bhikshus? The teaching on conditioned genesis is very deep and hard to see. And deeper and harder to see is the abandoning of all grasping that leads to the end of all craving and desire. And the realization of the state of freedom that comes with the silencing of notions, namely Nirvana. So it's not easy to understand that there isn't a separate self. And in the sutra that we read before, it said there can be a self as long as you recognize that that self is always changing, is not secure. And the Buddha said, the Buddha doesn't go on the path that says, I am the same person who did that. I, the person who's suffering now, am the same as the person who did that. That is one extreme. And the other extreme, I who did that thing, are completely different from the person who is suffering now. They are both extremes, and the Buddha teaches the Dharma dwelling in the middle way. And that middle way is very difficult to describe because it's beyond concepts and notions. We don't have the language to describe it, and so we cannot conceptualize it. But we can touch it by meditating on interbeing. So once I was suffering because, in the way that I described, I had hurt somebody and they hurt me back. So I was receiving the fruit of karma. But then I stopped and I meditated on interbeing. And I saw that the one who had done the hurting, the I who had hurt somebody else, is not a separate self. The I who had hurt someone else was my mother, my father, my education, my society, were many things in that. And when I said that or did that, I was like an ambassador. I was representing my mother, my father, many different things. And now, when I receive the hurt back, I am also an ambassador. I am receiving it on behalf of my mother, my father, my teachers, whoever I am representing in this moment. And when I saw that, I was really happy because I saw that I'm helping my ancestors. And I'm quite happy to suffer because it's a way for me to learn. And as I learn and I do better next time, all my ancestors are also learning and doing better. And at the time I suffered, I wasn't suffering alone. My father, my mother were also suffering with me. And when we see in terms of non-self, it's much easier to bear the suffering. And when there are great disasters in the world, like earthquakes, tsunami, where so many people die, like war, we also receive that suffering because part of the collective consciousness. And we can practice to see this suffering is not mine. This suffering is the suffering of the human species. And the human species has to learn how to take better care of the earth. And I want to support the human species as best as I can. So the Buddhist practitioner is not afraid of birth, is not afraid of death. And we don't practice in order not to have to be born anymore. And when we think about the Nirvanas, we have to think in terms of the extinction, we call it sometime. There is no 12 Nirvanas and no extinction of them. And when we talk about extinction of ignorance, we mean that ignorance is replaced by understanding. And when ignorance is replaced by understanding, we look at formations in a different way. So yesterday we saw that or the day before yesterday, we saw that in the 12 Nirvanas, conditioned by ignorance, are so the word for formations is samsara. And samskara, can be of different kinds. There are physical formations, mental formations, and physiological formations. So physiological formations are your body. Mental formations are like your anger, your love. And physical formations are the mountain, the river, the flower, the tree. So 3 kinds of formations. And we say that ignorance conditions formations, and formations condition ignorance. We don't put ignorance first. We don't say it was there before formations. How could it be there before formations? Since ignorance has to come from our consciousness, come from our body. So when ignorance conditions formations, we have a way of looking at things and to see that formations are separate selves. Everything is separate from everything else. I am separate from you. You are separate from the flower is separate from the forest, and so on. So this is conditioned things. Conditioned things. Is how you can translate this as formations, or you can translate it as conditioned phenomena. It means phenomena which are conditioned by things other than themselves. But you must remember there's no themselves, so it gets difficult with our language. Wittgenstein say, wovon man nicht sprechen kann, darüber muss man schweigen. Yeah. This limits of language is difficult. So, we can talk about conditioned phenomena, and the other day we talked about the fourth thing in the sutra about Nirvana: unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned. So it's to do with this word. Unconditioned is the same word as Samskrita. Samskrita, past participle. So we can translate samskara as formations or conditioned phenomena. But when we have ignorance, we don't see the conditions. We just see the phenomenon. So I look at you and I say, you hurt me. And I see you as just one solid block. I don't see you as in me, and me as in you. And when I see you in me, and me in you, then I am looking at formations with understanding. So we can say that understanding conditions formations. But here we haven't seen the nature of formations. We haven't really seen that they are formations. They're there, but we see them as separate selves. But here we see the nature of formations when we have understanding. We see the nature of formations, and they are no longer separate selves. So we no longer really want to say, the formations are mine, my skandhas are mine, I am the formations, because they are not separate selves. Just in the sutra we have to ask, who is the formations? You have the tendency to answer, I am my body, I am my feelings. My feelings are me, are I. My feelings are mine. But when we have understanding, we don't want to say like that anymore. We say that this body is made up of everything that is not this body. Like this breath, which we practiced earlier on, is not made by me. It's made by many causes and conditions. So again, you ask, what is the unconditioned? That the Buddha said is the escape for the conditioned. In fact, to escape from the formations which are conditioned by ignorance, we have the way of the formations which are conditioned by understanding. And this meditation is which takes us to a level where we cannot conceptualize anymore. Today, when we practice like that, you could touch that level where you can't conceptualize. You say, there is no one breathing. There is only breathing. Peace is the breathing. Joy is the sitting. And you have the relief of being able to get rid of the I, which is a little bit of a burden. You can put that down. And you can experience something that without that meditation you probably would not have experienced. Without these teachings of interbeing, you would not be able to experience. But that we cannot, that which we call the unconditioned, it doesn't mean to say suddenly things are not made up of conditions anymore. It means you touch a level you cannot conceptualize this is conditioned or this is unconditioned. Because as long as you have a duality between conditioned and unconditioned, you are still caught in concepts. So you have to go beyond that kind of duality. You have a duality between samsara and nirvana. You are still caught in concepts. You're still caught in dualism. I very much wanted to have a chance to look at with you at Nagarjuna, but run out of time, I think. Nagarjuna uses a particular kind of logic. It's called dialectics. It's like you're having an argument with somebody, or one person says this, and then Nagarjuna say why it's not right. Nagarjuna, the chapter that we have here on page 18, is the verses on what is called svabhava. Svabhava means self-nature, but they don't really, not easy to translate certain words into Chinese, and so they translate Kumarajiva, translated into Chinese as verses on being and non-being. It's okay. So, Nagarjuna wrote another, it's a whole chapter, I don't remember which chapter, near the end, a chapter on Nirvana. Na samsarasya nirvana kinchit asti. There is not any distinction at all, or any difference at all, of samsara from nirvana. It's not here. It's not in the book.
There's one on page one right after being a non-being, page 22, about nirvana.
No, it's not there. I'm sorry. I put the book together, so I don't know. Sorry, anyway. Okay. There is not the slightest distinction between nirvana and samsara. There is not the slightest distinction of nirvana from samsara. There is not the slightest distinction of samsara from nirvana. and Nirvanasya Jaya Koti Samvarasya. Okay, the boundaries of Nirvana, the limits of Nirvana, they also are the limits of samsara. Not the slightest, most subtle difference can be seen between them, between Nirvana and samsara. And this teaching of Nagarjuna are to shake us up, because we have this very strong dualism between Nirvana and samsara, which makes us want to get out of samsara and get into Nirvana. But in fact, without being in samsara, we cannot touch Nirvana. So don't try and get rid of samsara, because you will get rid of Nirvana at the same time. However, don't make any more samsara. We have enough of it already. There's quite enough there. So I just like you to look at page 18. And this verse 4, and on page 20 you see in Sanskrit, Svabhava parabhavabhyam rite bhava kutah punah Svabhave parabhave cha sati bhavo hi sijate. So it's difficult to translate this into Chinese for Kumarajiva. And so he's used without self, nature and other nature, how can we have phenomena? Number 4, fab. Phenomena is what? Fab? Only with self and other nature can dharmas be possible. So in Sanskrit, if you read it, it says, without self-being and other being, how can we have being? Because being is always I am, or you are, or it is. There always is somebody who is being. You don't have an abstract being. So only when we have self-being and other being can being be possible. I am you, and you are me. Isn't it wonderful that we inter-are? So the answer to being and non-being is inter-being. And we are always, for thousands of lifetimes, grateful to Thai for giving us the word inter-being. Because although it has being in it, it gets us out of being and non-being and takes us on the middle way, which is not caught in being or non-being. Today I volunteered myself to talk about Nirvana and the different kinds of Nirvana. But I think we're all full up already. If ever you come across two kinds of Nirvana, One is called Nirvana with remainder, and the other is called Nirvana without remainder. And the one without remainder you can only realize after you've died and you no longer have 5 skandhas. And the one with remainder is what you can realize in this life. That is another fly in the soup that needs to be removed. Nirvana, according to the teachings of the Buddha, if we look deeply, Nirvana can be realized in this lifetime. Sandittika Nirvana, Sandittika Nirvana, the Nirvana that you can have in the here and now. And if you do well in the meditation, let the Buddha walk, I don't need to walk. And I think you will be able to taste Nirvana in the here and now. And maybe you say it still has a remainder, but all the same is nourishing for us, and we don't really care whether it has remainder or doesn't have remainder. So this is the last talk of our 21-day retreat. And this evening you have a chance to sit together and sing together, so we don't need to sing No Coming, No Going now. But when you do sing, if you do sing, no coming, no going, no after, no before, I hold you close to me. I release you to be so free. You may like to remember some of the teachings that you've heard in this retreat, and really see your interbeing nature with the person who is singing alongside you, or in front of you, or behind you.